Now 5:30 and a quorum of Plan Commission is present. So I will call this meeting of June 21st, 2021 to order. First, we will hear from our technical facilitator, Jesse Poole.
All right, welcome to our virtual Plan Commission meeting. We're going to cover a few basic items before beginning. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking on the link or calling the number in your original email. To members and city staff, members, if you are able, please activate your video and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you are able, please activate your video when you are speaking. The chair, clerk, and technical facilitator are responsible for muting and unmuting committee members. Use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak, ask questions, or request a roll call vote. During any roll call, all panelists will be unmuted briefly. Staff, click raise hand when you are asked a question. The chair will do their best to call on committee members in the order in which their hands are raised. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak, the name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. Clerk will tell you when your time is up. After speaking, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the board, please send it to the email list in today's agenda. Chair, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jesse. The first item is public comment, and I do not see anybody registered for public comment. The next item is communications, disclosures, and recusals. Members of the body should make any required disclosures or recusals under the city's ethics code. Are there any disclosures or recusals? Seeing no raised hands. Next, we have the minutes of the June 7th meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Seeing no raised hands, could I have a motion for approval? Moved by Commissioner Cantrell. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Solheim. I will assume unanimous consent of that motion unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, motion passes unanimously. Okay, we have a few meetings scheduled for the future. The first one is a special meeting, July 8th, 2021, and note that that is at 5 o'clock rather than 5:30. And we'll hear an update about the planning framework. I think Heather Stouter will have a few more words to say about that during the Secretary's report. Then on July 12th, July 26th, and August 9th and 23rd, we do have regular meetings scheduled. Commissioner Cantrell, did you? Okay.
Unfortunately, I will not be here for the special meeting on July 8th. And I will review the materials beforehand, and if I have any comments, I'll get those to Heather. But I'm sorry, I'm going to miss that meeting.
Okay. Thank you for letting us know, Commissioner. Any other comments or input? Okay, then the next item on our agenda is new business, but I think I'll go first to the consent agenda so that people who are interested in that and any of the items can sign off if things are approved on the consent agenda. So it is the custom of the Plan Commission to remove from the items those items on which staff believes an application has had sufficient review to warrant approval with all the conditions placed upon it by various city departments. on which the applicant accepts those conditions, and there are no individuals who have registered to speak in opposition to the item. These items are placed onto a consent agenda, and we address them at the beginning of our meeting so that people who are interested in those items can disconnect unless a member of the commission requests separation, in which case the item is moved from the consent agenda and taken during the regular course of business. So of the items before us today, I will read the agenda number of those that are proposed for the consent agenda. Those are agenda items 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, and 15. Are there any requests by commissioners for separation? Seeing no raised hands, I will read each one of those then into the record. The first item on the consent agenda is agenda item 3, Legistar 65846, approving the amendment to the project plan and boundary for tax incremental district 46, Research Park, City of Madison. Agenda item 4, Legistar 65873, approving the creation of and the project plan and boundary for tax incremental district 48, Regent Street, City of Madison. Agenda item 5, Legistar 65874, approving the creation of and the project plan and boundary for tax incremental district 49, Femright Drive, City of Madison. Agenda item 7, Legistar 65661, creating Madison general ordinances to rezone properties located at 6145 through 6301 Mineral Point Road and 502 Genomic Drive, 19th Alder District, from Planned Development District and Mixed Use Center District to PD Planned Development, General Development Plan, and creating section 28.022 through 00505 to approve a specific implementation plan. Agenda item 8, Legistar 65141, located at 6145 through 6301 Mineral Point Road and 502 Genomic Drive, 19th Alder District, consideration of a demolition permit to demolish a skilled nursing facility as part of a planned redevelopment in Planned Development District zoning. Agenda item 9, Legistar 65475, located at 204 North Few Street, 2nd Alder District, consideration of a conditional use in the traditional residential varied 1 district for an accessory dwelling unit to allow an existing accessory building to be converted into an accessory dwelling unit. Agenda item 10, Legistar 65475, located at 1101 Williamson Street, at 403 South Ingersoll Street, 3rd Lake Ridge Historic District, 6th Alder District, consideration of a conditional use in the traditional shopping street district for a building with less than 75% non-residential ground floor area to allow creation of a ground floor apartment at the rear of an existing commercial building. Agenda item 12, Legistar 65477, located at 640 West Washington Avenue, 4th Alder District, consideration of a conditional use in the urban mixed-use district for an outdoor eating area for a restaurant, tavern, and coffee shop. Agenda item 13, Legistar 65478, located at 824 through 826 East Johnson Street, 2nd Alder District, consideration of a demolition permit to allow partial demolition of a single-family residence, and consideration of a conditional use in the neighborhood mixed-use district for a restaurant tavern to allow an existing commercial building and residence to be converted into a restaurant tavern.
Matt, Liddell.
Yes.
Chair.
That's okay.
We're 5 minutes early for the public hearing.
We don't have a time for public hearing anymore.
We've been informed by Dan Rolfs that we can't act on the 3 TID items at least until 5:45 because that was the time that they were noticed for.
Oh, okay. We had changed that to not having that, but unfortunately, you're right. The agenda erroneously has the public hearing as starting at 5:45. So I'll go ahead and read the items into the agenda, but we will then not act on them until 5:45. Thank you for pointing that out.
My apologies.
Yes, thank you. Agenda item 14, Legistar 65479, located at 2302 Packers Avenue, 12th Alder District. Consideration of a conditional use in the commercial corridor transitional district for an outdoor eating area for a restaurant tavern. Agenda item 15, Legistar 65480, located at 5404 Woodley Lane, 14th Alder District. Consideration of a demolition permit to demolish a single-family residence and construct a new single-family residence. We unfortunately, due to the erroneous notation in the agenda, cannot act on these for another 3 minutes. So we will hold off on those. And I am going to ask for, rather than getting into agenda item 2, I am going to ask for the secretary's report, and then we will go back to the public hearing items. Heather, can you give the secretary's report, please?
I can, and I wanted to apologize for the snafu there too. So the TID issues were publicly noticed as starting at 5:45, and so this was it. We should have discussed it earlier today. My oversight on that. I will start with just the Common Council actions of their recent meeting in a record-setting time. The council meeting at the council, they acted on the 3 Plan Commission recommendations and approved those on Town Center Drive, Pioneer Road, and D'Onofrio Drive and Point Place. Coming up on July 8th, I wanted to mention, as Liddell said, we'll have the special meeting focused on an update on a proposed way we might move forward with our sub-area planning. So a new planning framework that we'd like to take a look at that would help us get full city coverage over a reasonable course of time. So every decade, we'd have an opportunity to update a sub-area plan in all parts of the city, basically. And we did discuss this at length last year. What we'd like to do is just bring the Plan Commission an update and also a template for what one of these plans could look like if we were to go this direction for some of our future sub-area planning efforts. So we'll have an update on that, and we'll hope to get materials to you just as soon as possible to review in advance of that meeting. On July 12th, we expect a full Plan Commission meeting. I'll just mention a few of the items here. 575 Zor Shrine Place. This is a very large multifamily residential development proposal on the west side near the Beltline. A zoning text amendment to amend the downtown height map in the area covered by the Lamp House plan. And this was one of the issues brought before the Plan Commission last December at a special meeting. So we'll be implementing, hopefully, the recommendations from the Plan Commission at that time by ordinance, by changing the height maximums in a small portion of the downtown area to reflect recommendations in that Lamp House plan. I'll mention also 849 East Washington Avenue, a major redevelopment proposal for a new 14-story mixed-use building. with commercial space on the first floor and 226 apartments. And then not shown here on this list, but it will be on the July 12th agenda, is the Dane County proposal to expand the public safety facility downtown. And so that will also be on July 12th. And then July 26th, also a fairly full slate for Plan Commission. We'll have the first on the list there at East Washington Avenue and 1st Street, a major redevelopment proposal for a mixed-use building with 290 apartments. And then 222 to 232 East Olin Avenue. This is McGrath's proposal for rezoning, demolition, and new mixed-use building at 18 stories with 290 residential units. And then third on the list is the return of the Ramish Farm plat, which was before you a few meetings ago. The current developers coming in with some changes based on the last discussion that the Plan Commission had. And I think that those are the major items that'll be before you then on July 26th. Thank you.
One other thing that I think you mentioned was going to be covered on July 12th was the update that Commissioner Cantrell requested on hotels.
Thank you. Yes, we have that almost pulled together for you. Not quite ready for this evening, but a lot of work's been done on that, and we'll have just a short report on that on July 12th.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so back to our consent agenda. On the items that I read, we will open the public hearing. There are no registrants on any of the consent agenda items. Tim.
Yeah, hi. Again, Chair, it's been clarified by Dan Rawls from the Office of Real Estate Services that we need to individually read the 3 TIDs, open and close the public hearings, and then vote on those items individually. So they should not be acted on the consent agenda.
Okay, thank you very much, Tim. So we'll act on the remainder of the items, and I'll open the public hearing on the items other than the tax incremental districts, and no registrants wishing to speak on those, so I'll close the public hearing. Is there a motion? Moved by Commissioner Cantrell.
Yes.
Thank you. And seconded by Commissioner Solheim. Any input, comments? Seeing none, I will assume unanimous consent unless there is a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the motion passes unanimously. Now we'll go back and read each of the TID agenda items into the record and act on those individually. So agenda item 3, Legistar 65846, approving the amendment to the project plan and boundary for tax incremental District 46, Research Park, City of Madison. Could I have a motion on that? Commissioner Cantrell.
Move approval.
Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Solheim. We will come to a vote. If I do not see a raised hand to object, I will assume unanimous consent. Seeing no raised hands to object, motion passes unanimously. Moving on to agenda item 4, Legistar 65873, approving the creation of and project plan and boundary for tax incremental District 48, Regent Street, City of Madison, opening the public hearing. No registrants. I will close the public hearing. Do we have a motion? Commissioner Cantrell.
I move approval.
Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Solheim. We will come to a vote. I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, motion passes unanimously. The next item is agenda item 5, Legistar 65874, approving the creation of a project plan and boundary for tax incremental District 49, Femright Drive, City of Madison. I will open the public hearing. There are no registrants wishing to speak. I'll close the public hearing. Do we have a motion? Commissioner Cantrell.
Move approval of TID number 49.
Thank you. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Solheim. We will come to a vote. I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands to object, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Going to then agenda item 2, Legistar 65260, amending the Hanson Neighborhood Development Plan, a supplement to the City of Madison Comprehensive Plan to provide updated recommendations for the area located along Portage Road between Hanson Road and De Loretto Avenue. We will have a presentation by Jeff Greger. Jeff?
Thank you, Chair. I'm here to share with you the proposed Hanson Road Neighborhood Development Plan amendment and then answer any questions you might have regarding that amendment. So this amendment is being proposed due to the fact that the city planning received a development proposal for 577 dwelling units in 6 4-story buildings, which works out to a density of 50.8 dwelling units per acre. That proposal is not consistent with the current version of the NDP. The developer requested an amendment to the NDP, and the district alder agreed to sponsor that amendment, which allows for consideration of this amendment. A little bit of background, the Hanson Road Neighborhood Development Plan was adopted in 2000. This proposed amendment would impact only the southeastern portion of the planning area. As you can see, a blow up here on your screen. So the amendment area we're looking at the area south of Hanson Road, west of the interstate, north of De Loretto Avenue and Churchill Heights neighborhood, and east of this area of floodplain associated with the Starkweather Creek. The area is about 123 acres, and per the cooperative agreement, it's slated to come into the city in 2036. And the entire amendment area is now within the DeForest Area School District. The area is composed of a lot of environmental features: wetlands, floodplains, hydric soils, woodlands, and some steep topography, mainly the northern half of the amendment area. That's why you'll see in a minute here the proposed changes are taking place in the southern half of the amendment area. The 2000 Neighborhood Development Plan proposed all low-density residential, effectively single-family residential. The proposed amendment is adding some density to the area, not quite as much density as what's being proposed in the 11-acre property north of De Loretto Avenue, however. So this amendment is proposing some housing mix 4 across from an expanded park. That housing mix 4 is ringed with housing mix 3, and then as you head north, some housing mix 2, and this proposal is preserving the single-family residential low-density housing mix 1 on the western side of Portage Road. This amendment's also reconfiguring the road system, the internal road system slightly, getting rid of the cul-de-sacs, and maybe having a few less streets on the east side of Portage Road. There's also some minor transportation recommendations to eventually connect this neighborhood to the east with the American Center, There is a proposed crossing, either an overpass or underpass of the interstate to connect this already existing pedestrian bicycle path to the east. There's also a proposal within this amendment to add buffered bike lanes and sidewalk along this rural section of Portage Road. So as development occurs towards the north, the road would get reconstructed into an urban cross section with buffered bike lanes and sidewalks. There's also some existing Metro Transit routes within the American Center, and also just at the bottom of the image here, Route 6 comes up Portage Road and turns onto Hayes Road, and I'll talk about transit service a little bit more extensively in a minute. This is that example of the proposed cross section for Portage Road, 2 11-foot travel lanes, 2 buffered bike lanes, and then 5-foot sidewalks on either side. It's recommended in the plan text to look at, once you get north of the proposed development, evaluating if sidewalks on both sides of Portage Road are necessary, or if one side would be sufficient. So we held a neighborhood meeting on March 31st, and this is just a summary of what we've heard. Some of these are addressed in the staff memo. We heard that the intersection of Portage Road and De Loretto Avenue is dangerous and will get worse with more density. Portage Road is a dangerous road to drive and bike on due to the curves in the road and speed that traffic is driving. We heard that the residents in the area like the suburban feel and are concerned about the increase in density, that it will change the feel of the neighborhood. Concerned that more development in the area will cause stormwater and drainage issues. And residents were in favor of the Churchill Heights Park expansion proposal. Staff has talked with traffic engineering staff about the possibility for some rapid flashing beacon at the intersection, some signage prior to the curves to alert drivers and bicyclists to those curves, as well as the potential for reducing the speed limit on Portage Road. We've also gone to the Transportation Policy and Planning Board, and their feedback is summarized on this slide. They raised a number of concerns about adding density in this location is not appropriate. That added density within the DeForest Area School District is not appropriate because the existing schools are too distant. And some concern about whether Metro Transit will be available to serve this area, and then the lack of pedestrian and bike access to the American Center. I just want to share with you some of the response, or the staff response that we provided the Transportation Planning and Policy Board. Just real quickly here. So as far as the increased density being appropriate for the edges of the city, staff feels that this development pattern that's proposed in the amendment is not unique to the city of Madison, that this development is the natural extension to the development that's already there to the south. This area is identified in the growth priority areas in the comprehensive plan based on its proximity to existing development, utilities, and the fact that it is in the central urban service area. The proposed change from single-family residential to a mix of housing types would utilize this well-located land more efficiently, and it's intended to produce a variety of housing types. And while this parcel, the parcels in the amendment area are generally undeveloped, it is interior to a significant amount of development to the north and east in the Ratman neighborhood area, just on the other side of the interstate. And as I mentioned before, this area of the town of Burke will become City of Madison in 2036. And staff anticipates that the city will continue to grow in this general area consistent with the comp plan. Regarding the concerns over adding density within the DeForest School District, on January 25th of this year, MMSD and DeForest Area School District agreed to a boundary change. This boundary change was initiated in response to the city's review of a development proposal on the north side. And DeForest Area School District transferred 2 parcels between Packers Avenue and Sherman Avenue. This is a map of that. So these 2 parcels used to be in DeForest and they were transferred to Madison. And this red triangle used to be in the Madison School District and has now transferred to DeForest. The justification for that boundary change was that the areas along Portage Road were more proximate to the DeForest area schools than the area along Packers Avenue. Staff contacted the DeForest area school district to find out the number of students that were bused from this amendment area from the 2019 to 2020 school year, the last school year prior to the pandemic. And there were 43 students bused to DeForest schools at that time. And that was from the Churchill Heights subdivision west of Portage Road. Also, during that school year, there was 1 student attending MMSD schools from the Hidden Creek Apartments, which are east of Portage Road and just south of De Loretto Avenue. The proposed development in the NDP is expected to generate an additional 72 students in the DeForest area school district through 2035. And those students would attend Windsor Elementary, which is 7 miles from the amendment area, DeForest Middle School, which is 9 miles, and DeForest High School, which is 9 miles. So the city of Madison has 9 different school districts within its borders. And staff feels that the city should continue to grow in these areas if it's consistent with our growth policies. The distances of 7 to 9 miles are not unique within the city of Madison. A couple of examples, 1202 McKenna Boulevard, which is just north of Elver Park, is a multifamily development. And those students would travel 5.2 miles to the elementary school in the Middleton Cross Plains District, 12.1 miles to the middle school, and 4.5 miles to the high school. Another example on the east side is at 804 Felon Road. That's in the Jana Village development, which was approved and is either beginning development or soon to begin development. There's a proposed multifamily development over there. And those students would travel 6.2 miles to the Sun Prairie Elementary School, the Meadowview Elementary School, 6.6 miles to the middle school, and 7.1 miles to the high school. We've also asked transportation engineering and MPO to do some traffic projections, just to give an idea of how many new daily trips would be generated by this new development. Currently, Portage Road north of Hayes Road has an average weekday traffic volume of 2,950 trips. And the MPO projected that traffic volumes in 2050 would rise to between 5,500 and 6,500 average weekday trips. The proposed development in the NDP amendment is projected to produce approximately 4,000 new daily trips at build-out. And it's broken down by housing mix and the number of trips by housing mix. Traffic engineering division staff indicated that a collector street like Portage Road should be able to handle these additional trips. The third concern that TPPB expressed was they asked what the potential to extend transit service to the north along Portage Road. Currently, Route 6, as I mentioned before, comes up Portage Road and turns down Hayes Road. There are bus stops at the intersection of Hayes and Portage, and then another set to the east of that. These purple circles are a quarter-mile radius. That is what Metro Transit determines as a property being served by transit. So as you can see, the majority of the density proposed in the amendment, it would be served by transit today. Whereas we have areas within the city on the east and west side that have been approved in the last, few years that are located outside of transit service. Some of those are along South Point Road, Thousand Oaks, Acacia Ridge. There's a few more, Eagle Trace and Birchwood South. None of those have transit service. And then on the east side, Jana Village and Woods Farm, two other recently approved developments, are outside of the transit service area for Metro. So this is kind of unique where at least part of the amendment area would be served by transit. Metro staff is doing a transit network redesign, and they are presenting two contrasting options, one focusing on coverage, one focusing on ridership. Likely the actual design completed later this year will fall somewhere in the middle of the spectrum. And Metro staff felt that due to existing multifamily land uses in the area, that the working assumption is that eliminating all-day transit service is unlikely, and service on Portage and Hayes will remain. But service on Portage Road north of Hayes may or may not be added. And then finally, the concern over lack of pedestrian and bike access to the American Center. Developing areas like this one in the Hanson NDP often experience a disconnected pedestrian and bicycle network for a period of time. Properties do not typically develop in sequential order, and the Hanson NDP is not immune to these development patterns. Due to the way the networks are built out, full connectivity is achieved only generally when the area is close to fully developed. That ped bike crossing of the interstate would likely occur when WSDOT has an interstate construction project adjacent to this amendment area. Currently, WSDOT is conducting a study of this stretch of interstate, but there is not a programmed improvement project as of yet. And finally, the ped bike connection to Hanson Road would occur as development occurs. And I just realized I may have not been sharing my screen. So let me just pull up a couple of, can you see my screen or is it?
Yes.
Oh, you did. Did you see the maps that I showed?
Yes.
Okay, good. Then I won't go over those again. So that happy to take any questions regarding the proposed amendment.
Let's hear from our registrant first who wishes to speak. Heather Alston Shannon, Portage Road, Madison, neither support nor opposed and wishing to speak. Heather, you will have 3 minutes.
Great, thank you. So as the owner of 5525 Portage Road, an 18.5 acre property, we're an inn and an agricultural property, and in the Hanson development area, we're concerned about the watershed that's going to affect our property, causing stormwater and drainage issues. My neighbor Lori can attest to the drainage issues that were never supposed to occur, but did with the current development. That has affected both of our properties. She's been here a lot longer than we have, but she would be able to address that better. We would like to know exactly what is the plan for the pumping stations that will be installed. What is the possible effect on our property that's been designated open space by the City of Madison plan? Since it's lower than that of the adjacent property that will eventually be Churchill Estates, we're concerned about our pasture becoming a pond unless there is sufficient water drainage, and we would like reassurance by the city that this is not going to happen. And although I've been told that our property will not be affected or changed by the city without our permission or request, I am concerned, we are concerned, and that we may become referred to as a nuisance property. Tim Parks quoted that in a previous meeting, that yes, that's what it would be called. If we're surrounded by dense housing that suddenly finds our farm objectionable, even though we've been here for generations. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of Heather before we go to questions of staff?
Chair?
Yes.
We have another person registered to speak.
Okay.
It is Terrence Wall, Parmenter Street, Middleton.
Okay. Terrence, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Staff did job with the whole summary. And I just want to comment that we're willing to put in the driveway in the location of the proposed public road, but we don't really feel that the public road needed because the parcel to the north of us is quite narrow and there's just not enough room there. The rents are quite, consumers are quite sensitive to rents in this neighborhood, and it's important that we keep the rents within the range that they can afford. And, you know, building a multi-million-dollar road, public road, you know, can really drive up the rents. I just wanted to put that on the record, but I thought staff did a good job with the whole summary and explanation. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of either of our registrants? Seeing no raised hands, are there questions of staff?
Could staff point out the area that the first speaker was the land that she was talking about, that 18 acres? I'm not quite certain where that is.
There we go. I believe this area adjacent, just north of the single family and or housing mix 1 and housing mix 2, this general area up here.
Can you put the cursor on there?
Oh, yeah, sorry. This general area here.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any follow-up questions, Commissioner Cantrell?
No, not at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other questions of staff? Alder Lemmer.
Thank you. Commissioners received an email from the area alder expressing wanting the housing mix that's north of De Loretto and east of Portage Road to be changed to almost all housing mix 4, and then the most northern part would be 3. I was wondering if staff could speak to the reasoning behind the housing mixes that are proposed in the amendment and their thoughts on that request.
Sure. So in general, the idea is to place the higher densities along higher traveled corridors, arterials, and collectors, which Portage Road is a collector, as well as placing them close to, adjacent, within walking distance of features such as parks. So as you can see, that's why the housing mix 4 is placed where it is. The other reason why it steps down into housing mix 3 towards the interstate is due to interstate noise. There is a buffer proposed along the interstate. The idea behind that would be potentially a landscape berm to reduce interstate noise. But the idea is to put less dense development towards the interstate because of the noise. And it's also a further distance from the amenity of the park. So for those reasons, that's why we're proposing the mix of housing in this area just north of De Loretto.
Okay. Thank you. That's the only question I have right now.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Heck. I unmuted you. I don't know why.
Sorry, I'm click happy. I can never remember in which meeting I have to unmute myself and which meeting I don't. Anyway, along the same lines, so would the housing mix 3, are the building heights prescribed to be less than in housing mix 4, the maximums, or is it all about density?
It's more about density. Housing mix 3, we're talking 2 to 4. Your average is probably a 3 to 4 story building. Housing mix 4, your average could go up to it's somewhere in the 4 to 5, so slightly higher, but it's more on the density of the development. So we're talking densities of 20 to 40 DU per acre for housing mix 3, and densities of 40 to 70 DU per acre for housing mix 4.
Thanks. I was thinking about the effectiveness of this barrier, this berm, and the lower heights seem logical, not necessarily lower densities, but that's curious. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Cantrell.
I guess my question for staff is how inconsistent is the developer's plan that we're going to be seeing on agenda item, I guess, 6, with housing density 3 or 4 that's recommended?
So their proposed density is 50.8 dwelling units per acre. So it falls more in line with the housing mix 4. This overall proposal is an additional 544, 546 units total, whereas the proposal for just this 11 acres is 577 dwelling units. So it's a considerable, it's more than the overall proposal for this NDP amendment. Tim might have some more information.
Tim, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I was just going to note that the plans that are before you for the rezoning are conceptual, but they show 6 4-story buildings across the site. And it's our recommendation that, if the housing mix 3 is approved as proposed by staff, that, any future development proposals that would come forward on the 4205 Portage Road site that we'll be discussing shortly reflect the character of those 2 housing mix districts with shorter development east of the north-south street that staff is proposing, and higher density to the west between that street and Portage Road opposite the expansion of Churchill Heights Park.
Thank you.
Did you have any further questions, Commissioner Cantrell?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Heck.
Thank you. This may be for Jeff, but it may also be for Heather. I'm thinking about the TPPB process and input on this. And I'll be honest, I'm not necessarily swayed by some of it, but as we've been approving these fairly dense projects on what I'll call the outskirts of Madison, I remember our approving many that, and some of which Jeff mentioned, and much further away from transit and compared to this one. But I wondered if you could comment on how Plan Commission perhaps can contribute to a rethinking perhaps of these types of things that are in the comprehensive plan, particularly from just to rein in sprawl and the lack of CO2 emission sensitive development that we're promoting by doing this. Do you recommend that it would need to be a rethinking of some aspects of the comprehensive plan in these areas? And it doesn't necessarily have to be Plan Commission, it can be other bodies too, but I'm just curious what your advice is if we want to rein in some of these large developments like this.
Ms. Stouter?
Sure. I mean, I think that it's a great question. Now, across the city and quite frankly, across the Dane County region as a whole, we know that we need a variety of housing types to serve the needs of this region. And in our comprehensive plan, one of the city's goals was to try to grow more in infill sites than on our city's periphery, right? We want to look back 10, 20 years from now and see that a greater proportion of our population growth has been accommodated within the Beltline, basically, within infill areas that already have some development today. And part of the rationale for that, a huge part of it, is that we want to grow in a compact, fiscally responsible, fiscally sustainable, and environmentally sustainable way. We want to minimize our impact on the region's farmland, have an adequate supply of housing of a variety of housing types in different areas of the city. I think in this particular case, at the staff level, we do see the Hanson Neighborhood Development Plan as being fairly outdated. We don't think that the current recommendations within it for low-density residential make a lot of sense moving forward, especially since this area is served by transit, which is something we certainly can't say for a lot of our higher intensity multifamily development that is happening on our city's periphery. So I think, on balance, while this isn't something that we would consider to be, one of the most fiscally responsible places to grow, perhaps, like we would an infill site on East Washington Avenue, this isn't very bad. I mean, we have employers nearby, we have transit service in this location, and this location has some multifamily, but a lot of single family homes, and I think can benefit from a greater intensity of development than the 2002 Hanson Neighborhood Development Plan calls for today. Now, you asked whether we need to take a closer look at our comprehensive plan recommendations, and I think that we certainly will do that again in the future. But one of the, besides the goal to do a majority of our growth accommodated as infill development, we also have goals related to, creating a variety of housing types in all areas of the city, complete neighborhoods that are served by transit. This is a piece of that. We don't have all of the ingredients here, grocery stores and other amenities, but it's well served by parks and will be even better served by parks if this amendment passes. It's served by transit, which again is I think a critical piece here. I think one of the issues that's come up recently, and I want to add this to the discussion, is that when the Plan Commission, when the council is considering investments in affordable housing, and often low-income households that are living in income-restricted housing may not have vehicles. And so often there's a real push to make sure that we're not supporting as a city income-restricted housing on our city's periphery that's further away from services and other amenities. This, for what it's worth, it's a market rate housing proposal, and there are many, many like it across the city, including many on the city's periphery that aren't served by transit at all. And at least, I think that this one is better positioned than many. And, you might say, well, just because we've done things one way doesn't mean we need to continue doing them. And I think that's true. I definitely think that's true. And that the TPPB had a lot of good points and that they're thinking really hard about where we should be accommodating our growth. But, if you think from a regional perspective, if we, the city of Madison, were to say that we would not support high intensity multifamily development that's not very well served by transit, what is that signaling to our communities around Madison who don't have transit service? Are we really saying there should be no multifamily development in Wanakee, for instance, or Stoughton, or, and I really think that it's important for the Dane County region to have different housing types across the whole county in areas that are served by differing or no differing levels of transit or even no transit at all. And so that's just something I wanted to add for consideration. I think if you think about that full spectrum, this site is pretty well poised to support some more multifamily housing. Is it the best location for it in the city? No. As you see proposals come through month in and month out, perhaps it's not the very best location, but it's certainly not a bad one. And so I think, generally staff is supportive of the neighborhood development plan amendment to allow for greater density in this location.
Thank you very much, Heather. Did you have any follow-up questions, Alder Heck?
Just maybe a thought that I think this, I don't necessarily disagree with most of what you said, but it does seem like, at some point in the future, we should have a bigger discussion about this issue. And maybe it's something that could be considered when we talk about sustainability even, and how that impacts the comp plan and the work of Plan Commission. I don't think now is the time to do that, though. I think we would have to think carefully through that if we were to even slightly shift our approach in evaluating these types of proposals. Thanks.
Thank you, Alder. Are there other questions of staff? If not, I would be looking for a motion. Commissioner Cantrell.
I will recommend that the Plan Commission approve the amendment to the Hanson Neighborhood Development Plan as recommended by staff.
Is there a second to that motion? Seconded by Commissioner Solheim. Commissioner Cantrell, did you wish to speak to your motion?
Yes, I think that, first of all, this area is within our urban service limits, an area that we can extend sewer water into. We've planned that for many, many years. And also it's a natural extension of the development that we have just directly south of this. I drove out there today and yes, this is on the edge of the city, but it's really very close to a lot of commercial development along the East Washington corridor. I think that this area is much closer to the transit service than a lot of the other developments that we've approved. I was driving around on the outskirts of the city in Fitchburg and some of the other communities. And I was amazed by the amount of development that just scattered throughout the south side of the city, that we have these huge multiple family developments that aren't connected to anything except other huge multiple family developments. This one is really connected to other development that we have. And I think that, the city grows property by property. Unfortunately, the city can't dictate that we have development that is so, proximity to each other. But I think this one is, and I think that we should approve it as recommended by staff. I think that the housing mixes also make a lot of sense. The street extensions make a lot of sense. And that's why I'm recommending that we support it.
Thank you, Commissioner Cantrell. Are there further comments or observations before we come to a vote? Commissioner Solheim.
I'll just add that I understand the concerns about sprawl, but in this case where we are taking an area that was planned for low density single family and adding a variety of housing types instead, to me that is a much more sustainable future development than what is currently planned for, and will certainly support future bus service and other pedestrian connectivities there. So I support the motion as well.
Thank you for those observations, Commissioner Solheim. Are there further comments about the motion before we come to a vote? Seeing no raised hands, we'll come to a vote. I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, motion passes unanimously. Moving on to agenda item 6, Legistar 63216, substitute creating section 28.022 through 00482 of the Madison General Ordinances to change the zoning of property located at 4205 Portage Road, 17th Alder District, from temporary agricultural district to traditional residential urban 1 district. And Tim Parks will give us an overview. Tim?
Thank you, Chair and members of the Plan Commission. Just briefly, following on the previous item, amending the Hanson Road Neighborhood Development Plan, the item that was sort of the genesis of at least a goodly amount of that, if not the entire amendment that you just recommended approval to the council of, is rezoning 11.35 acres at 4205 Portage Road from temporary agriculture to TRU1. The applicant revised the request from TRU2 to TRU1, which is the reason for the substitute that's on the agenda tonight. The previous request for TRU2 and until moments ago, the request for TRU1 was inconsistent with both the 2000 Hanson Road Neighborhood Development Plan as well as the 2018 Comp Plan Generalized Future Land Use Map, which recommended low residential for the site. As noted in the January 11th staff report, the rezoning couldn't be considered until at least the neighborhood development plan was amended. That is in process and now moving ahead. And as we discussed with that last item, the request is to rezone the site to TRU1 for a conceptual density of about 50.66 dwelling units per acre. The concept plan is attached to the legislative file with today's date on it, showing 6 buildings, 575 potential dwelling units organized across the 11.35 acre site. As a result of the proposed amendment, that density could now be consistent with the recommended land uses for the site in the Hanson Road NDP. However, there are 2 things that the concept is not consistent with that proposed amendment. First of all, the housing mixes that we just talked about, the housing mix 3 east of a future north-south street to provide access to this site as well as the smaller development sites to the north. And then also the housing mix 4 and the potential for taller buildings and some of that density that's shown on that concept plan to be concentrated on the western third of the site. So Staff believes that the Plan Commission can find that the proposed rezoning will be consistent with the proposed amendment to the Hanson Road Neighborhood Development Plan. We are encouraging that the rezoning include notices, if not conditions, that any future development of the site will include the dedication and construction of a north-south public street consistent with the land use and street plan in the amended NDP, and also that the housing mixes will be reflected on that concept plan, reminding the Plan Commission that any future development of 4205 Portage Road will require likely additional Plan Commission review for conditional uses for that future residential development, likely residential building complex, and also that there's likely to be a division of the property into smaller lots to facilitate that development. So you're not actually approving specific plans for the site now. It is a concept plan, but we just wanted to put on the record when those subsequent approvals come before the Plan Commission that we'll be looking for those the street connectivity and the housing mix to be implemented with those. And I'd be happy to answer questions after the public hearing.
Thank you, Tim. We do have two registrants wishing to speak. The first is Nick Patterson, West Main Street, Sun Prairie, in support and wishing to speak. He indicates he's not representing anybody, but I think he's representing maybe the developer. If you could clarify, Nick, we'd appreciate that. And you have 3 minutes.
Nick, you may be, there you go.
Yes, I am representing Interstate Overlook. And actually, Tim hit on a lot of good points. I think he did a really good job of explaining the proposal. So I don't have any additional items to touch on.
Okay, thank you very much. And the next registrant is Terrence Wall, Parmenter Street, Middleton, in support, wishing to speak, also indicating that he's not representing anybody, but again, I think he may be. So Terrence, if you could clarify, and you have 3 minutes.
Yes, thank you. Representing the developer, apologize with the registrations. We're not used to doing the registrations in this manner like we have historically, so apologize for that. First of all, I just want to say we're the pioneering green developer in the state of Wisconsin. We have the largest solar arrays anywhere east of the Mississippi River in the United States. We received Governor Doyle's award for energy assistance or energy efficiency. So we're all about green development. We dedicated the land for the public park. The neighborhood plan didn't really show that there's an additional public park just south of Hidden Creek, our development there. The city made a major investment in a bike path and a bridge over the creek, linking to the tunnel that goes under the interstate to American Center. And we have proposed that we didn't really get the staff to really bite on this, but we've proposed that we'd be willing to pay for and plan in our development a bike path, the continuation of the bike path in the buffer along the interstate and then wrapping out to Portage Road. We just really think that's important to have that linkage to the tunnel, the future connection to American Center. Second, the natural extension of Madison Metro is to go up Portage Road and then into American Center in front of the hospital, providing access to the hospital. We even volunteered to build a bus shelter in front of our new development. We don't really have any feedback on that, but we're certainly willing to do that. The things that we have concerns about are we'd like the private or the road, north-south road, we'd like to be allowed to make that or continue that to be private at this time, and that we only have to dedicate it in the future when there's a public road to the north of it linking to it. Otherwise, it's just a dead end. So we'd like to ask that be allowed to be private until we are required to dedicate it in the future, and we can document that, put a deed restriction in place. Our average density is about 50. The neighborhood plan for the parcels that we have, the average density is about 40. I would like to ask you to allow us to do that average density and to have higher density on the interstate side because the alternative is very expensive. So we're proposing 4-story buildings. We can build those out of wood frame construction. If we go to 3-story buildings along the interstate, and then we go to 5-story buildings along Porter's Road, then we have to build a concrete podium deck on the first floor, and that's $100,000 more per unit on that floor. So it's a very, very expensive proposition. As I indicated, the rents in this area are very sensitive, or consumers are very sensitive to rent changes and rent increases here. This is not, a really high income area. So we really want to make sure that this can be afforded by people in this area. So we'd like to ask you to allow us to have the proposed density.
Terrence, that concludes your available time. Thank you very much. Are there any questions of either of our registrants? Any questions of either of our registrants? Seeing no raised hands, I will close the public hearing. Are there questions of staff? Alder Heck.
Thank you. I think Tim Parks can probably answer this. I heard some concerns from Terrence Wall about the street and his desire to have this be a private street until I assume that parcels to the north are developed. Is that something that has been done in the past in analogous developments that you know of?
Tim?
I can't say that it has never occurred, but it would most definitely not be staff's preference. In terms of the construction of streets, private streets aren't built to city standards. The city cannot provide services on those streets. And there's no guarantee that even if development did occur on the parcels to the north of the subject site, that at the time that we went to take that private road as public in some manner, like Mr. Wall described, there's no guarantee that we would be successful. I believe Jeff Greger alluded to it during the Hanson Road item just previous, that one of the reasons we're encouraging this road east of Portage to provide access to these sites is so that as Portage Road becomes narrower, curvier, and hillier, that access to the Housing Mix 2, Housing Mix 3, and Housing Mix 4 development that is pending in that plan amendment can come from a public street or streets off of Portage Road versus individual developments taking access from Portage Road. So it would be our preference, as now recommended by the pending plan amendment, for the street to be public. We can obviously work with Interstate Overlook and Mr. Wall on the final cross section of the street, but it would be our preference that it be dedicated to the public and constructed to public street standards, both to provide access for this development and also to facilitate future development on the albeit smaller parcels to the north of it, in that sort of triangularly shaped area formed by the interstate, De Loretto, and Portage Road.
Thank you. One more question. There was some mention of offers to build bike paths and bike facilities. I assume those are the type of things that would be more appropriately handled when a development proposal is actually, an application is actually submitted. Is that how you would see that too?
Generally, yes. I might ask if Jeff could splash the recommended transportation improvements from the neighborhood plan back up on the screen or share those. I think we were primarily looking for those facilities to be along Portage Road in this area and to connect to a future crossing of the interstate south of the Hidden Creek Apartments or possibly at the end of De Loretto Avenue, but that it wouldn't run along the interstate as Mr. Wall proposed. And there it was briefly up there. Thank you, Jeff. But while there's still work to be done to figure out exactly what Portage Road would look like in terms of cross-section, we would anticipate some sort of bike-related improvement along Portage Road to connect up to Hanson and to a future crossing of the interstate.
Okay, thank you. That answers my questions.
Thank you, Alder. Are there further questions of staff? Are there any other questions for staff? Seeing none, I would be looking for a motion. Commissioner Cantrell.
I will recommend that the Plan Commission forward the zoning map amendment, rezoning 4205 Portage Road from temporary ag to TRU1 to the Common Council with a recommendation of approval, subject to the conditions from the review agencies beginning on page 6 of staff report on January 11th of 2021, and the two conditions of the dedication of the north-south street shown on the Hanson neighborhood plan, and the future development sites are expected to include the densities of mixed housing mix 4 and housing mix 3. Housing mix 3 being next to the interstate, and housing mix 4 along Portage Road as provided in condition 2.
Is there a second to that motion? Seconded by Alder Lemmer. Commissioner Cantrell, did you wish to speak to your motion?
Just briefly, I think this just reinforces what we just did before on item 2 on the Hanson development plan. We're not approving any specific development on this site. The owner, the developer, showed us a concept. He has to come back before the Plan Commission and show us what he's proposing to do now. I'm sure that he can build a very successful project based on the housing mixes that we've are recommending in the plan.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other comments or input before we come to a vote? Seeing no raised hands, we will come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is agenda item 11, Legistar 65476, located at 809 Williamson Street, 3rd Lake Ridge Historic District, 6th Alder District, consideration of a conditional use in the traditional shopping street district for an outdoor eating area for a restaurant tavern. I believe Tim Parks is going to give an overview. Tim?
Yes, Chair and members of the Plan Commission, it is me again. The request for 809 Williamson Street is a request to add an outdoor eating area for approximately 30 persons north of a building at 809 Williamson Street, which is part of a complex of 3 buildings at 805, 807, and 809. There's a description of those buildings in the staff report. Although I will note that one of the buildings includes a first floor restaurant, There is currently work occurring to convert 809 Williamson Street at the rear of the property into Doban Restaurant with seating inside for about 36. And as I mentioned, outside there requesting 30 persons. Restaurant taverns are a permitted use in the traditional shopping street district. Generally, however, outdoor eating areas always require, well, at least in the TSS district, require Plan Commission approval of conditional use. Staff believes that the standards for conditional use approval can be met. However, in reviewing the conditional use, the Plan Commission should note the comments of the Livingston condominiums located directly north of the site at 808 Williamson Street, which are attached to the legislative file. We have not received other public comments since those comments were received last week, but they did express concern about impacts from the outdoor eating area. However, some of those impacts are related both to the conditional use or proposed conditions of approval that staff does not believe can be applied because they involve other businesses and or properties. So we do believe that the outdoor eating area can meet the conditional use standards and the supplemental regulations. We are proposing that the outdoor eating area completely close by 10 p.m. And that there be no outdoor amplified sound. And I'd be happy to answer questions after the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. We do have some registrants. I will open the public hearing. The first registrant is James, although James seems to be have registered twice, in one case supporting wishing to speak and in one case supporting not wishing to speak but available to answer questions. So we'll go to James McFadden, 1 Langdon Street, Madison, and see whether he wishes to speak or not. James.
I do wish to speak.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. You have 3 minutes.
Yes. Yes, I want to, we always did express this is a restaurant. We'll have a maximum of 30 people. It will close at 10 o'clock. There'll be no amplified music. I think some of the concerns raised actually the very few concerns raised by the neighborhood concerned sound and the noise that might be generated. I think we've had abundant natural experiments in outdoor eating, especially since the streeteries they came on board. I think if we look at Bel Air across Martin Luther King, if we look at two things on the square, the Rare Steakhouse and the Cooper's Tavern, which each have over 30 people. We look at the Red Sushi Steakhouse, or Red Sushi, right here on West Washington, which has several times 30 folks outside. It's very difficult to discern a sound when you're walking on the street. It certainly becomes almost impossible to listen to a sound when one is across the street. This particular terrace is set 60 feet back from Williamson Street, 126 feet distant from the other side where the Livingston condominium is located. I do think if we just look around and really, sensed what is happening immediately adjacent, or even a farther distance from any of the existing eateries, I think the sound issue basically disappears. It's just hasn't been an issue, and it won't be an issue here. This is a restaurant. It's not a tavern. Big difference in the noise that is generated. I think Rajan really is looking at having a very nice and quiet, food-oriented operation. And I don't think this is ever going to even be noticed on the street, no less across the street. Thank you.
Thank you, James. The next registrant is Rebecca Kalabaka, South Livingston Street, opposed, not wishing to speak, but available to answer questions. And Kevin Heberline, South Livingston Street, opposed, not wishing to speak, but available to answer questions. Are there questions of any of our registrants? Seeing no raised hands, I will close the public hearing. Are there questions of staff? Are there questions of staff? Seeing no raised hands, I would be looking for a motion. Commissioner Cantrell.
Well, I'm going to recommend that the Plan Commission find that the standards are met and approve the conditional use for the outdoor eating area for a restaurant and tavern located at 809 Williamson Street.
Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Solheim. Commissioner Cantrell, did you wish to speak to your motion?
This is just adding another venue to this great street that we have in the city. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or input? Seeing none, we will come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the motion passes unanimously. That concludes our regular agenda items. Are there any comments? Is there any business by members? Seeing no raised hands, we've already had the secretary's report. Any additional announcements? If not, I'd be looking for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Commissioner Cantrell. Is there a second? Seconded by Alder Heck. And I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, we are adjourned, and I will see you all July 8th. Thank you, except for Commissioner Cantrell. Thank you.